would say an ontological problem. Ontology is the philosophical study of being. It's not that my being needs to change from one state to another. The problem is an epistemological problem. Epistemology is the study of knowing. It's not about knowing just a bunch of information. The problem is I've not ever investigated. Koham, who am I? The Upanishads say the Lord created the senses, here we mean the mind, with outgoing tendencies, meaning it's the nature of the mind to look at stuff. Even if you go to the therapist and she says, look within, dear, and what you do is you look at feelings and thoughts and traumas and memories. From the standpoint of yoga, from Vedanta, you're still looking at things. You're just looking at subtle things. We're going to be investigating, who am I? It's a rediscovery of my essential nature. Now, where do actions fit into this? Why do we do hatha yoga postures, do puja, do ritual, go on pilgrimages, do karma yoga? All of these things are suggested by the scriptures, and they are of value. But their value is in that purify the head and heart and make it fit for practice. All right, so we finished up with verse 10. Ganesh, would you please read the English of verse 10, and then we'll go ahead and chant verse 11.
May the wise and learned man give up all actions which are motivated by desires and start the practice of rediscovering the self, and thereby attain freedom from the bondage of birth and death.
Okay, before we go on to 11, let me review this, because I forgot this part. So what Shankara is saying here, the wise person, meaning he's got some understanding of the world, needs to understand that the message the world gives us, I'll be happy when, it will be better if I'm unhappy, more, better, different. These are what we call niyatam karmas, obligatory actions, in order to get what I want. And at some point, we begin to see getting what you want gets you what you want. But it doesn't make us happy. It doesn't give us peace. We get at best a little bit of temporary happiness. But it doesn't mean we don't fulfill our duties in the world. That's not inconsistent with yoga. But we give up this idea that, oh, what's wrong with my life is I'm living in the wrong city. What's wrong with my life is I don't have a partner. Or what's wrong with my life is I have the wrong partner, etc. All those things really have nothing to do with happiness. All right, verse 11, please, Ganesh.
Chittasya shuddhaye karma natu vastu palabdhaye vastu siddhi vicharena akinchit karma kotibhihi.
And the English?
Selfless work and charitable acts help to purify the mind, but they do not by themselves contribute to the perception of reality. The discovery of the self is brought about only by discriminative analysis and never by any number of actions.
Yes. So the term for discriminative analysis here is vichara. vicharena, by means of vichara. The root here is vich, which actually means to winnow, to separate the wheat from the chaff. So again, he brings home this idea that all these actions, we can call this generally under the rubric of upasana, all these forms of devotion, ritual, action, spiritual duties, they help to purify the mind. And those of you who've taken class from me before know I'm a foodie, and I use the example of slicing a tomato. So you cannot slice a big ripe tomato with a very dull knife. The mind for most of us is like the dull knife. So the preparatory exercise is sharpen the knife. Selfless acts, worship, mantra, all these things that we do, they sharpen the wonder sword of knowledge. But how do I rediscover myself? How do I discover myself, who I really am? It is by means of this discrimination, Viveka. Separating the wheat from the chaff, separating the self from the not self. So I'm going to give you an assignment. Let's define for now the not self. Anything that occurs in time and space. Anything that is confined to past, present, or future. Anything that has a name and form. Anything that's in the phenomenal world, either in the waking state or the dream state. Anything that's gross, meaning it's things I cognize through my senses, or subtle, things I see through the mind and intellect. All of that is not self, anatman. If you can see it, you're not it. I'll give you an example. Can you all see the phone?
Yeah.
You're not a phone. You're the one who sees the phone. So if you can perceive it, you are the knower. What is perceivable is the known. Subject, object. It is through this process of winnowing away the chaff, the not self, that we rediscover who I really am. And it is by this means alone that our real nature is rediscovered. Any thoughts or questions on this point? Number 12, please.
Samyag vicharatah siddhaha rajjutatva vadharanam bhrantyodhi maha sarpaha bhay bhrantyodhi maha sarpabhaya Bhrantyodita Mahasarpabhaya Dukkha Vinashini. The fear and sorrow created by the delusory serpent on the rope can be ended only after fully ascertaining the truth of the rope, which is available for recognition only through steady and balanced thinking.
Yes. So we have here one of the most famous images in all of the Vedanta literature. It is not new with Shankara. Snakes and ropes, snakes and ropes, snakes and ropes. They're always talking about snakes and ropes. So the way to understand it is with a story. So once upon a time, there was a king, and he was fat. And he liked to drink wine and smoke a little bong in the evening and get loaded. So one night, it was very hot. So he got himself a little tipsy and a little high. He sinks down into his tub before he's going to go to bed. And of course, because he's fat like me, the water goes over the side of the tub. And he kind of dozes off a little bit. When he comes to, he decides he's going to get out. So he gets out of the tub and he steps down and he steps on a snake and he's going, the serpent must have come in because it was attracted to the cool water. And because he screamed, the servants look. And the king says, don't come any closer. I am a goner. The snake is going to bite me, but you stay away. And then one of the servants raises his lantern and says, Your Majesty, it's not a snake, it's a wet piece of rope. So he looks down. Sure enough, what he thought was a snake was a rope. So, where did the snake exist? Was the snake on the ground? No. Snake was in his mind. He experienced what we technically call adhyas, which means superimposition. There was a substratum, the rope, and he had the non-apprehension of the rope, and then the subsequent misapprehension. He thought it was a snake. As the result of the misapprehension, he was filled with fear. Now, let's take this example. How do you get rid of your snake? You investigate what's really there. You find, oh, it's not a snake, it's a rope. Vichara, investigation. Now, this is a very important example because some people will say, oh yes, I've been meditating now for 20 years and I'm getting advanced in my Vedanta studies. That's like saying, oh yes, I've been studying for years and the head of the snake has turned into a rope. Another common fallacy is we think if we beat up the body, what I call flesh hating, I can get the good spirit out of the nasty old body. So I go through all sorts of austerities, deny myself, all sorts of just normal worldly experiences. Somehow this is going to do it. In the East and in the West, you see people who do things like lie on a bed of nails, stick things through their flesh. The Catholics had a whole a group of people in the Middle Ages called the flagellants. Not the flatulence, the flagellants. And they would go from town to town whipping themselves to try to get rid of the plague. They thought, oh, if they punish their bodies, God would somehow stop sending the plague. Some people, like in the Opus Dei movement, put a thing called, I think it's called the cilia. It's a band they would put around their thighs with little points in it that would be terribly painful. That somehow beating up the flesh is going to be able to free us. That's like taking a baseball bat to your snake. If I beat up this snake enough, it will become a rope. It's crazy and it doesn't work because it doesn't address the problem. Here's another one. Rope, 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 rope. Chanting in and of itself will do no good. You can chant till you're blue in the face. And it's not going to make the ego sense turn into the infinite. Because the problem is not an ontological problem. It's not a problem of being. It's a problem of knowing. My problem is, I do not know who I am. And when I have the non-apprehension of my self-nature, the mind then superimposes onto that direct experience a false self, a counterfeit self, a phony self. And you're never going to be freed by trying to beat up that phony self. You don't beat up your ego to be free from it. We have to see what's really there. You either see the rope or you're still deluded and you see the snake. You either see your essential nature, I am that ground of being, or I think I'm a person. You either see it or you don't. This is an incredibly important idea. All right, next one, please.
अर्थस्य निश्चयो दृष्टो विचारेण हितोक्तितः न स्नानेन न दानेन प्राणायामशतेन वा. Neither sacred baths, nor any amount of charity, not even hundreds of pranayamas, can give us the knowledge about our own self, but a firm experience of the nature of the self can be gained when we send our thoughts along the rails of argument laid down in the salutary advices of the wise.
Now, it doesn't say rails of argument. That's Swamiji's poetic license. Vicharena, it says, by means of investigation, by means of this winnowing, but a particular kind of investigation, the kind of investigation that's laid out in our scriptures. Now, again, he's bringing home the point. Sacred baths, pilgrimages, pranayama, you could do all the huffing and puffing. You'll get high, but it will not liberate you. Diet, all of these things, They serve to purify the mind. They're knife sharpening. But unless we investigate, we will not rediscover our self-nature. Another image I like to use, the mountain of truth has many, many paths up it, all of them valid. On the top is the temple of truth. There's only one temple up there. And it only has one door. And that door is aham. I. Find out who I is. There's no other way. And all of the sacred traditions in all cultures ultimately end in that. Now, for Westerners, this idea of laying down or engaging in investigation as laid down in the scriptures may not have the same authority that it does for Indians. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what we call the four pramanas. Pramana means a means of knowledge or an authority. For those of us who seek self-realization, who want this direct experience, the first source, the first authority for this knowledge is the Upanishads, the concluding portion of the Vedas. We call this Shruti. We call this scripture. India's great cultural contribution to the world has been the systemization of spiritual experience. It's a great treasure. I like to paraphrase Karl Marx. He said, religion is the opiate of the populace. And if that be true, India has the inside dope. They have been able to refine the technology. Idiot in, Jnani out. That process is laid out in the Vedanta scriptures. First authority. Second authority, second pramana, is the collected wisdom of the great saints and sages through history. Smriti. Smriti literally means what we remember. So Shankara says it's true. Ramana Maharshi says it's true. Nisargadatta Maharaj says it's true. Chinmaya says it's true. For me, so far, everything that they've said has proved to be true. The third authority is your own reasoning. We do what we call mananam. Think about it, you wrestle with these ideas. Let your doubts come up. Well, if that's what you're saying, then what about blah, 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 blah. You challenge what seems to not be logical. You think about it until you have a sense of conviction. Yes, I think this is true. And then the final authority is your own direct experience. We prove the veracity of this in the laboratory of our own lives, the laboratory of our own minds. Real spirituality is profound common sense. Real spirituality does not require that you believe in anything absurd. I hear running water. Whoever is doing it, would you mute your mic?
There's lots of people with their mics not muted. Could you please mute them? Ron is one, and
Yes,
so is
please
Kali.
mute your mics when you're not talking, please. The exception is Ganesh. Fourth praman, your own direct experience. Your own direct experience. And your own direct experience should line up with the prior three.
Jim, is there a difference between the third and fourth? You said mananam is the third.
You think about it.
Okay.
And then the fourth is your own direct experience.
Okay.
So you can have a good intellectual understanding of it. I believe this. I thought it through. But I don't have time to meditate. All right. So here again, Shankara is saying that the way to come to this, we can do all these prior practices, but in the end, it's vicharena, instrumental case, by means of vichara, by means of this investigation, that we come to the direct experience. And why is this important? Because we can confuse the preparatory means for the direct means. Many people can spend decades in spiritual practices. They don't get anywhere because they're still in that preparatory dimension rather than doing the investigation. All right, next verse, please, Ganesh.
अधिकारिणमाशास्ते फलसिद्धिः विशेषतः उपाया देशकालाध्याः सन्त्यस्मिन् सहकारिणः. Ultimate success in spiritual endeavors depends entirely upon the degree of fundamental qualifications in the seeker. Auxiliary conveniences such as time and place all have a place indeed, but they're essentially secondary.
So this is an important verse, one of the most important verses. In your own text, I would recommend that you put a star next to it, highlight it. Success in spiritual endeavors is entirely due, strong words, to the degree of the qualifications of a fit student, adhikari. Other factors, such as time and place, and I would even say the guru, while important, are fundamentally secondary. Now, this is good news. Many of us have traipsed around saying, oh, I'm looking for the perfect master. I'm looking for the right guru. I haven't been able to find her yet. I keep looking. Oh, I can't do my yoga because I have to go to work, or there's no quiet time in my house. I have a family. There's all these conditions. I'm waiting till I have a better time or place. And what Shankara is saying, those are of value. But what you can do, and what's most important, is become adhikari, becoming a fit student. Now, do we become a fit student and then start our investigation? Actually, the whole process of yoga is becoming a fit student. When you are finally fit, self-realization will easily dawn upon the mind. So that's all the work we really need to do, is become a fit student. Now, these are subtle practices of head and heart. Now, there are 4 that are classically enumerated, but Shankara actually is going to give us a few leading up to the enumeration of those 4. And he's going to give us one more after. So let's now move into this next section of study, how to become a fit student. What is the Jnana Yogi, the one who's taking the path of wisdom, the most direct, actually the fastest path to self-realization? Next verse, please, Ganesh.
Ato vichara kartavyo jignyasoratmavastunah samasadhyadaya sindhum guru brahma viduttamam. Therefore, a true seeker of the self should learn to inquire and meditate after duly approaching a guru who is himself established in the experience of the self and who is an ocean of kindness.
Daya Sindhu, an ocean of kindness. Ocean of kindness. So, why do we need a guru? First of all, let's talk about what that word is. The dictionary definition means heavy. So when I was very, very fat, it was very clear that's how I interpret it. I'm not so heavy anymore. But in one of the Upanishads, and I have forgotten which one, there's a secondary definition, which comes from, they break it apart in a different way. Gu, which is a root which means what's hidden or what's covered. We get words like in Hindi, gufa, which means a cave. Or in Gita, we have Raja Guhyam, royal secret, that which is hidden. So with this etymology, the guru is the one who uncovers what's hidden. Now, why do we need a guru? Well, theoretically, you don't. But then I suppose you don't really need to study, go to medical school to become a doctor. Father Mark, are you, or Father Mark, Dr. Mark, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Didn't you have to take all sorts of boards to become a doc?
Yes, I did.
Could you have just gone to the library and studied all that?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, it's theoretically possible, isn't it?
Yeah, theoretically, yeah,
But what's the easy way?
no easy way. But it's
Well,
it's
you go to
easier if
medical
you have a
school.
teacher.
You learn from experts. You learn from people who have done this before you. If you wanted to be a nuclear physicist, you could theoretically go to the library and study nuclear physics. But the easy way is study in school from physicists. It's the same with the spiritual life. This is the most subtle of all the sciences. Raja Vidya, royal knowledge, the supreme knowledge. And one of the things the guru does is he cuts away, or she cuts away, all of the ancillary stuff and helps us go right to what works. One of my favorite scriptures, some of you have studied this with me, Tripura Rahasya. In the beginning, there's a very wonderful story, a famous story, between an enlightened sage a woman, Hemaleka, and her very dumb but funny husband, Hemachuda. And we get to go through the whole process of Hemachuda's enlightenment. And the summation, why they tell this story, is to point out what is the root cause of liberation. The root cause of liberation is sadhu sangha, satsang, association with the wise. If you find someone who knows what they're talking about. How do I know if my teacher knows what he or she's talking about? You don't. So you need to have a very good bullshit detector. Swamiji used to say, the longer the beard, the more the distrust you should have. And he had a very long beard. But what you can do is take these practices and these ideas as hypotheses and see whether or not they are true or false in the laboratory of your own experience. And if your teacher is a Satguru, a teacher of truth, at some point you will begin to have Shraddha, faith. They know what they're talking about. Greatest way is, are they bringing you into an experience of yourself? So this is the easy way. So what you want to do is find out how to end the cycle of births and deaths, the rat race of suffering, fear, anger, delusion. Find someone who wields a means of knowledge, one of these sacred traditions. Many, many times people will say, oh, Jim, why do you teach from these dusty old scriptures? Why don't you just talk from your heart? And I say, because I'm not smart enough. The tradition's incredibly powerful. Why reinvent yoga? It's been honed into this incredible, powerful tradition, and it works. All right, next verse.
Medhavi Purusho Vidwan Uhapi Havichakshanaha Adhikaryatma Vidhyatma Mukta Lakshana Lakshitaha. He who has a keen memory with enough knowledge of the world outside, and understanding of the world within, who can argue for the scriptures and refute arguments against them, is fit for receiving Atma Vidya.
So here he gives us our first indications of what we need to be adhikari, a fit student. The first idea is medha, which is a keen memory. Does this mean I have to be able to memorize long sections of scripture? It can be helpful. It's not necessary. The subtle meaning of medha is I can remember to apply the appropriate principle of the teaching in the life experience when it's happening. So frequently, I'll have people come to class and we'll cover a particular section and I'll say, what does this mean? And someone will raise their hand and they'll have the answer. But can they apply that in their life? So that's the subtle meaning of Meda. Can I apply the teaching in my life experience? Yes, it's absolutely essential that we meditate. That is absolutely a requirement. But I tell you, the progress in our yoga is done in my life. I will draw to me the exact experiences where I have my attachments, where I have my identifications. Nothing else has brought it to me but my own karma. And it's perfect. It's exactly what I need to go through to practice these principles. So that's Medha. So the student, the adhikari, also needs to have a knowledge of the world outside and an understanding of the world within. What does he mean by this? You need to have gone out there in the world and have a pretty good idea what the world can deliver and what it can't. So you get a job that's paying, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay. Has that made you happy? When I got the job, it did, but it faded. Are you still having issues with people? Yeah. Oh, I can't wait till I get a partner. I want to be married. And you get married. And then the honeymoon's over. And you learn very quickly that all marriages are hard work. If you want to know what your character defects are, get married. So many things. So what the knowledge of the world outside means is I see that getting what you want simply gets you what you want. There's no enduring happiness or peace. I've yet to meet a person. Oh yes, I'm making X amount of thousands of dollars a year. It's enough. I want a raise. I want a new title. And of course, what Swamiji used to say, if sex were satisfying, we'd only do it once. So, knowledge of the world outside. 95 cents worth of work for a nickel's worth of pleasure. It's just bad economy. And an understanding of the world within. This means the adhikari, the fit student, has understood to some degree, hopefully a large degree, their own psychology through watching their mind. Maybe they've had therapy. It's not necessary. It's a great act of self-esteem to do it. But whatever process, through meditation, through journaling, all sorts of methodologies. You begin to become familiar with what your doshas are, your character defects, what your patterns are. Do you have control issues? Do you have intolerance? Are you judgmental? Are you critical? Are you a people pleaser? Do you have difficulty with authority figures? You know, I'm telling you mine. I don't know what yours are. But you get an understanding of the world within. An understanding of the world within. So that we don't approach this work naively. There's a term that's used in kind of pop spirituality now, and I'm loath to use it, but I'm going to. They call it spiritual bypass. And that's where people get involved in a spiritual practice and they think it's about whacking themselves into some sort of altered state. And what they don't do is go through the manual labor, the excavation of all that stuff that's in the unconscious. It has to come up. We have to look at it. There's again a technical term for this. It's called kashaya. It's the vomiting up of the unconscious. Another term we're going to get is hridaya granthi, the knots of the heart. Of course, the optimum way of doing this is as we're sitting in meditation. Many have heard me say, just don't do something, sit there. Out of the unconscious, these knots of the heart arise. And we just bathe them, as it were, in compassionate, curious awareness. And just don't do something, sit there. And if we don't try to fix or run or hide or refrain or deny or blame, they will dissipate. I promise you that. I don't promise many things in this work. That's one. So we have to move through this excavation of all that's in the unconscious. Again, when Shankara had talked about gaining that full manhood, I would rather use the term warrior spirit, being virya. I like that term better, because it takes great courage to be a yogi. It takes great courage to embrace all the dimensions of our own psychology. How petty and vengeful and greedy and jealous, and competitive and hypersensitive. Also how generous and kind and selfless. A whole range of the human psyche is within each of us. And we want to be willing to see all of it.
Jim, if I may ask a question, in your life, was this the best way for all these knots of the heart to dissipate? Was to sit with them, and do they still come up for you, or do they stop at some point?
I don't want to go into that right now.
Okay, sure.
All right, so having a keen memory, knowledge of the world outside, and understanding of the world inside, and then that student who has these particular qualities approaches a guru. who himself is an ocean of kindness. Daya Sindhu. Next one.
Vivekino viraktasya shamadigunaशालिनः mumukshoreva hi brahma jignasayognyata. He alone is considered qualified to inquire after the supreme reality, who has discrimination, detachment, qualities of calmness, etc., and a burning desire for liberation.
So here Shankara enumerates these classic 4 qualifications of a fit student. The first is viveka, discrimination. And he will later define that more explicitly. He'll expand on it. The second is vairagya, dispassion, or the transcendence of our worldly passions. The third is shamadhi guna, shama adi guna, qualities of shama, etc. So it's a gang of 6. Sometimes it's also called the inner wealth, shatsampati. So these are a group of 6 which are incredibly rich when we get to them. And then the fourth is mumukshutva, the burning desire for moksha, for liberation. I tell people that self-realization is not difficult. The Lord himself, Lord Krishna, in the Gita says, easy to perform. But self-realization is incredibly rare. And the reason is nobody wants it. Nobody wants it. Let me give you a gross example of this. So I was talking with a fellow today. He has a great career as a nurse, has his own apartment that he just got. He's separated from his partner. Just coming back from having a drug relapse on crystal methadone. And he's got about 3-4 months clean. Everything was working for him. You think what he'd want is freedom. What he'd want is to go back to work. What he'd want is to be useful in his life. What he'd want is to have love in his life. Instead, on Saturday, he decided to do crystal meth. He calls me today, and he was loaded today, and he was going into drug-induced psychosis. He's been here before. We're crazy. But that's only an extreme case of the human condition. The scripture says, leave the funny farm. Drop the rock. Give up this toxic relationship with the world of name and form. Come home. Revel in your self-nature. Find a way to really be useful in the world. Be happy. Don't worry. Be free from fear. And part of our mind says, oh yeah, that sounds really good. But I can't stand this, and I must have that, and I want this, and I'm not. And we go just like, it's no different. It's just more socially acceptable. what do we say? All right, we'll gratefully refund your misery. Knock yourself out, as you hear me say. Go ahead. Go ahead. Bang your head against the brick wall enough, and then you will develop mature mumukshutva. All right, I'm done. I'm ready to come home, Jim. All right. Let me show you the awakened state of mind. Okay, I have 8:30. Ganesh, what verse are we on?
We are going to be starting 18.
18. So some of you remember that for next week. We will be starting on verse 18. It's now 8:30. We have time for questions. And remember, I'll share with you what my teacher, my guru, said. I don't want any stupid questions. And then he would say, the only stupid question is the one you don't ask. So ask your questions. You would say, the guru is like a bell. You have to bang it with your question to get any sound out of it. Don't be shy. Is anybody still there?